You can replace this text with any text you wish. If you've ever wondered how one single moment can quietly turn an ordinary life upside down, and then rebuild it into something stronger, stay with this story until the very last line, because what begins as an awkward accident slowly becomes a journey of courage, dignity, and second chances. Rashid never planned to work late that evening. As a widowed single father, his life ran on a strict rhythm built around school pickups, homework at the kitchen table, and bedtime stories told with a tired smile. He worked as a facilities supervisor in a towering corporate building downtown, a place of glass walls and silent power where he usually felt invisible. That night, rain hammered the windows, and a last-minute maintenance alert sent him to the executive floor, an area he rarely entered. His mind was on his daughter, Ara, and whether she had eaten the dinner he'd left warming on the stove. When he opened a door he thought was an empty office, time froze. Inside stood the company's CEO, composed and formidable in every boardroom rumor, hurriedly changing after spilling coffee on herself before a late meeting. Rashid instantly turned away, apologizing in a rush, his face burning with embarrassment. He expected anger, humiliation, or worse, his job gone by morning. Instead, there was silence, then a calm voice telling him to wait. She thanked him for his respect, for not staring, for treating the moment with dignity. It was brief, human, and strange in a building that rarely allowed either. Rashid left shaken, replaying the moment all the way home, unaware that someone else was replaying it too. The next days were heavy with anxiety. Rashid moved through his shifts expecting a summons that never came. At home, Ara sensed his tension and asked if he was in trouble. He smiled and said everything was fine, but his eyes betrayed him. Then, a message arrived requesting his presence in the CEO's office. He went in ready to accept whatever consequence waited. Instead, she surprised him by asking about his life. She had noticed how quickly he apologized, how instinctively he turned away, and it reminded her of a decency she felt was rare in her world. When she learned he was raising a child alone, juggling work and parenthood without complaint, something shifted. She spoke not as a powerful executive, but as someone who had sacrificed personal life for success and now wondered about the cost. She offered him not charity, but opportunity, training, flexible hours, and a chance to move into operations management if he wanted it. Rashid hesitated, doubt battling hope, but he thought of Ara's future and accepted. The accident that should have ended everything quietly became the doorway to a new path. If the first turning point began with an awkward mistake, the next began with a question that wouldn't let go. What do you do when life finally opens a door you were never meant to knock on? Rashid's promotion brought new challenges, skeptical colleagues, long meetings, and the constant fear of being exposed as someone who didn't belong. He made mistakes, learned slowly, and sometimes went home exhausted enough to fall asleep at the table. But every night, Ara listened as he explained what he learned that day, and in her eyes he saw pride instead of worry. The CEO, watching from a distance, saw something else too, a man who led quietly, who listened before speaking, and who treated people at every level with the same respect he had shown her that night. Over time, their conversations grew deeper, centered not on the accident, but on values, responsibility, and the meaning of leadership. She admitted that power had isolated her. Rashid showed her that purpose could reconnect it. When a major crisis hit the company, an operational failure threatening hundreds of jobs, it was Rashid who stepped forward with a solution rooted in empathy rather than fear. He spoke for workers who had never been heard and proposed changes that saved both money and livelihoods. The board resisted, but the CEO backed him, trusting the character she had glimpsed in a single unguarded moment. The plan worked. Jobs were saved. The company changed. And so did Rashid's life. He no longer walked the halls feeling invisible, and at home, Ara watched her father stand taller, not because of status, but because he had stayed true to himself. Years later, Rashid would still think about that rainy night, not with embarrassment, but gratitude. What changed his life forever wasn't what he accidentally saw, but how he chose to act in that moment, and how someone else chose to see him because of it. The story ends not with wealth or fame, but with a simple truth: integrity in small moments can reshape entire futures. And sometimes, the quiet dignity you show when no one is watching is exactly what the world needs to see. If you're still here, then you already understand that some stories don't rush to the finish, they slowly tighten their grip on your heart, because real change never happens all at once. Rashid's new role didn't magically erase his struggles. In fact, the pressure multiplied. Meetings ran late, expectations were higher, and whispers followed him through hallways lined with polished marble and quiet judgment. Some people assumed he'd been favored for the wrong reasons. Others doubted a man who once fixed broken lights could now fix broken systems. Rashid heard it all, but he said nothing. Every morning, before leaving home, he packed Aira's lunch with the same care he always had, tying her shoelaces, reminding her to be kind, reminding himself to be patient. Those small rituals grounded him when the corporate world tried to shake his confidence. At night, when exhaustion hit hard, he studied reports at the kitchen table while Aira colored beside him, occasionally looking up and saying, "You're doing great, Abu." Those words mattered more than any title. The CEO, whose name was Samina, noticed his quiet endurance. She saw how he stayed late without being asked, how he listened to junior staff who were usually ignored, how he never raised his voice even under pressure. One evening, she invited him to stay after a long meeting. Not to discuss numbers, but to talk about life. She spoke about loneliness at the top, about how success had slowly replaced joy, and how she sometimes wondered what kind of person she would have been if she had chosen differently. Rashid didn't try to impress her. He simply spoke honestly about fear, responsibility, and the strange strength that comes from having someone depend on you completely. For the first time in years, Samina felt seen not as a CEO, but as a human being. Then came the moment that tested everything Rashid had built. A powerful investor demanded massive layoffs to increase profits quickly. The board leaned toward agreement. Rashid knew what that would mean: families like his, suddenly broken by a decision made in a distant room. He barely slept the night before the vote. Memories of his own past surfaced, losing his wife, holding Aira while promising her that things would be okay even when he wasn't sure. The next morning, his hands shook as he spoke, but his voice stayed steady. He didn't argue with anger. He told stories. He spoke about people behind the numbers, about long-term growth built on loyalty, not fear. The room fell silent. Samina watched closely, realizing this was leadership she couldn't learn from any book.